Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome back to Mini Block Monday. Today we are piecing sugar bowl blocks, and you create 2 for every set of squares that you stitch. So let's get started making 2 sugar bowls in opposing colors like this. For this block, you will need, in a dark fabric color, cut 2 3-inch squares, and cut 1 2 5/8 inch square. In a light fabric color, cut 2 3-inch squares and cut 1 2 5/8 inch square. The first step is to create a set of half square triangles using your light and dark 3-inch squares. So place the squares right sides together and then mark a diagonal line from corner to corner. Here you can see I've already done this. Now you're going to take your 2 stacks of squares to your machine and you're going to stitch exactly 1/4 inch to both sides of the line. Here's what it looks like when you get that stitched. Now I'm going to trim my half square triangles apart just by cutting right along that marked line. And then I'm going to gently finger press the seam allowances open and flat. And you want to finger press first just so you get the seam open and you don't take it to your iron and try and dig at it with the tip of your iron. That really doesn't work. So I'm going to finger press first, and then you want to take it to your iron and give it a good solid press. And you're going to create a total of 4 half square triangles. So I've already got the 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now normally I would trim these half square triangles down, remove these little flags off the ends, and get them down to a set size. But we're not going to do that for our sugar bowl blocks. We want these to run a little bit big. Instead, you want to take these to your rotary cutter and mat and cut them diagonally in half. So take all of your half square triangles and cut them in half, just like so. And what you're going to notice is that all of your half square triangles come out and make 2 different shapes, and they're opposing. So whenever I hold them side to side, you can see that the colors, this is why we end up making 2, that the colors are opposed to one another. So take your time cutting all of your half square triangles in half. And you want to take your time with this because it can be confusing once you get them cut apart, what you get left with. So now that we have them all cut apart and you can see I have them all arranged just like so, I'm going to take and remove all of the lower right hand triangles. These will go into one of my sugar bowl blocks. Now I'll take all of the remaining triangles and that will go into the other sugar bowl block. If you try and use and mix them up together, you end up with a very different look. I mean, it still works, but it's not the look of the sugar bowl block that we're after. Okay, now we're going to start building our sugar bowl blocks. And from here, it's really more of a square and a square construction method. We're going to take the triangles and place them to both sides of that center square. Take the center square and fold it in half to find the midpoints on 2 sides. So I'm just going to fold that in half and make a little crease mark on 2 sides. Now I can line that up with the seam line on these half square triangles. I'm just going to flip that over and line up that seam line with that crease line I just made. Do the same thing over here. So that's all lined up nicely. I'll take this to the machine and stitch 1/4 inch to both sides. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with this other lighter version. I'm going to take my triangles, make sure that they are right sides up, flip them over so that they're right sides together, lining up the center seam of the triangle with the midpoint of the block. Make sure to fold that in half, find the midpoint, then line that up just like so, and again stitch 1/4 inch to both sides. And here's what it looks like once you get that stitched. And just like all of our square and a square blocks, we want to trim off these little flags that extend. So I'm going to line up the edge of my ruler with the edge of that center square. I'll flip my ruler over so you don't get glare. There we go. And I'm just going to trim off those little flags. Rotate it around and trim off this side too. So after you sew on 2 of your triangles, then we'll be able to sew on the other 2. So I'm just trimming off this last set of little flags This just makes piecing this unit a lot easier, and it also makes the back side of the block just a little bit neater. Okay, so I hope that you didn't mess up the arrangement of your triangles and where they were, because you want to make sure to line up the same triangles with your block. And as you can see, this isn't what we're going for. These triangles are matching up on the same sides. So obviously these triangles should go here. We're creating kind of a pinwheel effect, and always keep that in mind as you're piecing your sugar bowl block. So these triangles should go to this one. And again, if you mess it up and you have, the arrangement I just had, where you have the colors next to each other, I mean, that's going to make a pretty block too. It's just not what I would consider a sugar bowl block, right? All right, so there we go. We have our triangles arranged. That looks correct. So now line up again, flipping over those triangles, lining them up with the midpoint of the center square, and do that for both of them. Take these to your sewing machine, stitch exactly 1/4 inch to both sides. And here we go. We have 2 sugar bowl blocks. That was very, very easy to create. But of course, just like all square and a square blocks, these are going to finish a little bit big. So we want to grab our cutting ruler, and you want to look at the points here, the points that are right around your center square. You want to locate those and line up the 1/4 inch mark on your ruler with the points of that center square. That should line up a-okay. It might run ever so slightly small, meaning that the square in the center is inside of those marks, and that's okay too. So I'm just lining this up. It's also nice to have a straight line in your ruler running through the middle, but if you can't line all of that up at once, that's okay too. And it may end up being a little bit wonky like this. As you can see, mine is ever so, like I'm cutting a little bit more off down here than up here. That's just the nature of working with the half square triangles. Sometimes they can get just a little bit weird. All right, now I'm going to rotate it all the way around, and I'm going to line that back up with my ruler. And let's see here, I want the 3.5 inch mark. So I'm lining up the 3.5 inch mark over here, and I'm also lining up the 1/4 inch mark with that point of my square and a square, making sure all of that is lined up together, making sure that my ruler is straight across my block. Trim again. Okay, so then now all I need to do is trim this side to side. I want to make sure it stays nice and straight. And again, I'm looking at, sometimes I just have to rotate this around until I can find the arrangement that I like, where I can see that I've got a nice 1/4 inch on those points. The block is straight under the ruler, meaning I've got some lines lined up with the edges I've already cut, and this looks good. If you find yourself really struggling with blocks like this, it may be your fabric prep. That, consider pre-washing your fabric if you aren't already. Consider starching, pressing multiple times. I know that sounds crazy, but the more starch that you apply, the less the block can wiggle and distort out of shape. And I can already tell you that this one is ever so slightly distorted because I can see my corners aren't quite right on this one. And there could be any number of reasons. I'm going to blame it on the flood in my house repairs. This one's ever so slightly wonky, but here you can see this is more of what you're aiming for, where the diagonals are going into the corners just so nicely. So it can work out just exactly perfectly. Let's see if I can do this one better. Sometimes it's the cutting. It might be that this particular ruler is just simply a bad choice. Let me think. So let me try something a little different this time. Instead of worrying about the 1/4 inch mark and the really centering up the square in the square, I'm going to worry more about the diagonals here and just kind of try and get as close on that square and a square as I can. I think that this might end up working out just a little bit better. Nudge this over. Right here, I'm just looking at that 1/4 inch, aiming to cut this so that the edges are nice and straight, and I'm keeping that diagonal running through the center. I think that's where I was getting really off. Okay, and instead of cutting opposite sides, I'm just going to rotate this, rotate my ruler, go like so. This looks good. So understand, oops, that slipped. understand that any block, and especially weird blocks like this was really kind of just a creative tangent. I had an idea and I wanted to try it. You know, sometimes when you're trimming it down, you have to figure out what works for you. And that first method that I used didn't work out all that well. It did not didn't give me the results that I wanted. That's okay. But I want to improve. So here I think that lining up that diagonal, you know, if you have a diagonal on a block, it really should line up and come out on the corner. It should come out perfectly. And here's the thing, if it lines up nicely, then technically those points on your square and a square should be lining up too. So this time, yeah, this one came out just exactly right. So I think that's the better way to trim this up. Instead of worrying about your points of your square and a square, instead focus on keeping that diagonal line there and there lined up with the diagonal line on your ruler, and carefully trim each side until it measures 3.5 inches square. So there we go, 2 sugar bowl blocks. Cannot wait to see how you use them, how you make them. These will measure 3.5 inches square now, but when you piece them together or to other things, they will measure 3 inches square. So that's it for this tutorial. If you'd like to find more Mini Block Monday videos, click here to find a playlist of them all. And if you'd like more tips on quilt piecing, click here to find a video with my 5 main tips for piecing successfully. And if you'd like to learn even more, I have written a book about piecing. This is How to Piece Perfect Quilts. You can find it on my website at leahday.com/piece. Until next time, let's go quilt.